Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I speak to hospitality entrepreneur and belonging expert, Dan Berger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Nice to be here.
And belonging, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. Why belonging at work matters. And for someone like me who works from home, and I work with a lot of employees through Zooms and Slack and Google Drives and phone, I have to keep that, belonging going by, listening to them and, having these constant meetings. But how do you, well, you know what, before I ask you anything about like that, what does belonging really mean?
Yeah, great question. It's one of those words that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people.
Right.
Belonging is, first and foremost, a fundamental human need. It is something we all need. It's independent. In other words, there's many needs. That's one of them. It's an independent, validated need. What it means that it's the feeling and experience of feeling valued, accepted, and seen. So in other words, your contributions matter. You can show up as yourself, and you can do so in a safe manner. The other thing I'll say is that belonging, we call it a sense of belonging because we kind of feel it. It's intuitive. It's in our stomach. It's like the other senses. It's not a feeling of belonging. It's a sense of belonging, which is really important for the conversation around the topic.
Yeah. And, before we started the show, we were talking about the Eagles Super Bowl win and how that's a major belonging to this kind of culture of sports and, team, favorites. Look, the thing is, I was on a plane when the Super Bowl was happening. So the people watching it on mobile phones were all screaming, which is not good on a plane. It's really not. It was kind of scary at first. And then when we realized what was happening, okay. But I don't buy into the whole sports thing because these players are making bazillions of dollars, the coaches, the networks, the merchandising, like all of it's just making so much money. But these people are all, like you said, burning cars and going up poles and dying and rioting over a win, which makes no sense to me. Where's the belonging in that? Like, seriously.
Fantastic question. And if we want, we can go to talk about the halftime show. That's going to really get me riled up.
Let's
talk about sports. So let me take a step back. There are 6 paths to finding belonging. One of them is group membership, and a subcategory within group membership is events, because events give us a feeling of collective effervescence where we are a part of something bigger. It can happen in temple, it can happen at summer camp, or it can happen at a Super Bowl. That's number one. Number two, sports are kind of funny because we either play sports because it's a hand-me-down from our parents. They made us. It's either we played sports as a kid and then we still, the guys, oh man, when I was back in high school, I did the, there's that. So the second one, first one is hand-me-down belonging. Second one is nostalgic belonging.
Right.
And then finally, there's misconceived belonging, where we think we have a sense of belonging, but we actually don't. All that being said, there is a sense of belonging when you're rooting for a team, and that comes from a community of place, which is why a lot of people root for the team where they're not even from anymore,
right, or
their college. So it does bring a city together, and they do celebrate that. Now, I'll say one thing about this, which is when players are playing for a team from a city they're not even from, that's where they lose me. Because if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you're from Dallas, do you really care about Philly? Sure, you care about the franchise, but that's when it gets a little funny for me. So sports, they're a way to belong. There's many reasons why people do it. Men especially do it because it's pretty superficial, and it kind of is kind of a high five culture. But that's really it. I would say one more thing is belonging brings our small groups of friends together.
Yeah.
So if you got your college buddies following the college team, it brings it together. It kind of keeps that thread going. Doesn't mean you're still into it and is more nostalgic than anything else, but it does bring small people together to host people in their house or to travel together and so forth.
So that's the I guess the personal, social, sports side. And then there's a whole other side like entrepreneurship, business owners, workplaces. And, again, I mentioned I'm remote mostly. Yeah, we do meetings sometimes in person, but they're really rare. And I have to constantly have meetings with my team to make sure that they feel like they're part of a team. So how do you, especially, I mean, I know there's going to be more going into the office, but what about that remote working, hybrid working? How do you create that sense of belonging, not just like inclusivity, like, oh, you're included in these meetings, but like a sense of you belong to this organization?
Great question. So first and foremost, it's a founder decision.
Hmm.
It's a leadership decision. And you can either run a transactional workforce, which I have no problem, you know, getting behind if that's your style, or you can run a culture that's more integrated into people's lifestyle. And that's okay too. So first and foremost, it sounds like the leadership style you have is somewhat, conflicted a little bit. On one hand, you want to have, kind of like you come here, I pay you well, and you go do your thing. Because I recognize that professional and personal belonging are two separate things, and personal belonging always must come first. If we don't have a sense of personal belonging in terms of our family, in terms of our community, in terms of the groups we're a part of, then we can't have professional belonging. Because as soon as you quit or you get fired, everything's gone.
Right.
So first of all, it's a decision for the founder or leader, much like unlike core values, which should be a reflection of the leader but decided collectively. That's first. And second, like I said, it's it should come after personal belonging, which means, by the way, that employers should give space to employees to have personal belonging. When I ran my
Right.
last company that I sold for 100 million and got to 20 million in revenue, I did not believe that. I was like, work here or die. You don't go to happy hour, you suck. Like you don't participate,
Yeah.
you don't ask me a question during all hands, you don't give. So I had
Right.
that attitude, and it wasn't really fitting because I didn't respect the fact people had belonging outside of work. As it relates to creating a culture of belonging, there are 5 steps. The first step is hospitality, and it sounds like you're doing that.
Yeah.
Welcoming people, including them in meetings and so forth. That unlocks safety. Safety, once people feel safe and seen, they can engage, and then they can feel accepted and valued.
Yeah. I mean,
And after that,
I think part of what you're saying, well, I just want to talk about something for a minute. It's strong connections between founders and employees or coworkers. Because if you just treat them like employees, then they're going to just treat it as like, I'm getting paid, I'm doing the work, and that's it. And I don't do that. I try to create stronger connections between myself and the team by listening to them more, using their ideas more, asking for their creative process to be outlined more, and to collaborate more with me in a way where I'm not barking orders. I'm more trying to work with them to solve an issue or create something new. To me, that's my version of belonging, is like, I want you to feel like you are working with me, not for me. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I mean, that's where Stephen R. Covey's famous quote is people support what they help create. So, and I think this is where and in a way, and I'll touch on this in a second, but how we separate DEI and belonging and fairness. Those are three distinct things, which I'll touch on. But that's where the third, fourth, and fifth steps in the critical path to a belonging culture comes in. Because after hospitality, after safety, you have engagement, which is what you just touched on,
Yep.
and then you have commitment.
Right.
People are committed to the organization. Once they are committed, then there is belonging,
Yeah.
and each one of those things can be measured. As
Makes
it
a lot of
relates to
sense.
DEI,
What
yeah,
is
as it
what
relates to
is DEI for our audience?
yeah, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes people tack on belonging at the end. I don't think belonging fits in DEI because DEI is a HR program or metric, while
Right.
belonging is a managerial or leadership
Right.
responsibility.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but DEIs basically should be used for KPIs, like how are we doing on diversity? Who else do we want to target? What's the share of voice in a meeting? And do everybody, even though they're included, are they participating? And so forth. Let's use DEI for measuring our ideals,
Yeah.
and let's use belonging for defining the culture.
That makes a lot of sense. And since it sounds a bit intricately detailed and there's like steps involved and some nuances, are you noticing any kind of mistakes people are making when they're trying to create belonging in their
Oh
company?
yeah.
Like,
The
what are the
number one thing,
top ones?
well, the number one thing is complete inauthentic communication around the topic.
Okay.
How many times you walk into an office and it says, "You belong here. We
Oh
belong."
no.
Like that's so ridiculous. I mean, in fact, it's calling out the fact that leaders and program managers or whatever are liars.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal, Jason. It's impossible that everybody belongs everywhere. I like to say if everybody belongs, nobody belongs. And that's actually, by the way, let's get into politics, why both Trump and Kamala were unappealing to a lot of people.
Right.
Kamala says it's a huge tent, everybody belongs. Trump says only these people belong. And at the end of the day, it's horseshoe theory. The far left and the far right are completely closer to each other, like the bottom of a horseshoe, than at the top where you want centrists. So
Yeah.
one's tribal, one is too big of a community, and they both don't work.
Makes a lot of sense. I noticed the same exact thing, and it was definitely a fiasco that we are currently living in. And
That's right.
so let's say someone's listening to this or watching it, and they're saying, "Oh, I haven't even thought about including belonging at my company or my workplace." What would be like the first thing they can start to do to begin building it? Maybe
Well,
just for their personal life and for
yeah,
work, maybe both.
sure. Let me start with work and then I'll go to personal. So first and foremost, like we talked about, is belonging important to me? Will it help me achieve business objectives? And can I be authentic to it? Am I going to just slap you belong here, or am I actually going to
Right.
give up?
Right. So
That's
how
number one.
so how would they actually go along to do it so it actually means something?
Yeah. So if it means something, I think you hit the nail on the head defining it, what it means. And there's many definitions. I like mine because it coalesces all the literature and it puts away the BS that folks the spiritual new agey folks try to throw at you, where it's a feeling it's in completely, in this, it happens when you walk in nature or whatever. That's a part of it. So the first thing is figuring out if you want that kind of culture. Second thing is understanding what it is. And then third, I would say the number one thing you can do is focus on hospitality. Because when you have hospitality, it unlocks everything that follows. And what that means is having, not onboarding people. That's
Mhm.
such a kind of
That's not
orientation.
really tough. Yeah, I don't like that word either, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
it's like you're not going to the military, maybe like welcoming, maybe integrating, whatever. But like that,
That
just
that
find a word
reminds
that
me
works
of
for you.
like one of my first jobs where they would like put me into a room with 10 other people and with a TV with
Yes.
the VCR, and they say, "Watch this video." You watch the video, and then you say, "Anyone have any questions?" And no one would
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
their
yeah.
hands. It was terrible.
Well, Jason, the irony is that when it comes to, by the way, DEI and things like that, most training is done through videos. And the reality is that videos, the research tells us, don't actually help long term for
Of
all the
course
initiatives
not.
we try to do.
It's terrible.
It's a short term hit. It's not long term. The work on organizational fairness is very, very good. I forget the names of the folks who just published a book on it, but I highly recommend checking it out. It talks about that. So
For somebody
hospitality.
for somebody like me who in high school didn't really belong truly, we talk about this all the time between my family and friends, that I was kind of an outsider. I was a tech guy who was in the musician world. I was in the orchestra and stuff like that, the band, but I didn't belong to like the jocks. I didn't belong to like, the nerds. I didn't belong to like, anyone in particular, the cliques. I was always kind of jumping in between them. Did the same thing in
Yeah.
college as well. I was always jumping in
Yep.
between everyone. So I was kind of like everybody's friend.
Right.
So how can you, as an adult, feel like you belong to some sort of group? Because it's even tougher now.
Great question. I think the first time I didn't feel a sense of belonging was actually related to orchestra. So,
Yeah.
by the way, my life is littered with belonging traumas. I'm adopted, so my biological mom says you don't
Oof.
belong here from day one. My dad abandoned me when I was 2, my adoptive dad. So he told me he doesn't belong in our
Jesus.
family. And then I was an immigrant when I was 8. I moved to the United States, didn't speak a word of English, and I was kind of
An outsider
negotiating
again.
identities.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then when I got to the 4th grade, the first thing they do in 4th grade is like, who wants to try out for choir? There was 25 kids in the class. And me and Eugene from Russia did not get into choir. So me and Eugene sat every Friday afternoon listening to kids harmonizing down the hall, and we were just completely othered. And then
Oh,
I just and it
that's
sucked.
tough.
So I mean, who cares? Let the freaking children go sing. Anyway,
Yeah.
stupid mistakes. To answer your question, the way I like to think about it, number one is figuring out your belonging archetype. I basically came out with 4 personas. You can go belongingquest.com/quiz, find that quiz. It'll tell you what you are, tell you what you need to do. It's eager belonger, which are represented as a chimp, anxious belonger, represented as a meerkat, reluctant belonger, represented as a snow leopard, and independent belonger, represented as a wolf. And your listeners probably get images of those kinds of folks. Chimps are running around, meerkats are scared, snow leopards are alone, and wolves can do whatever they want. So
I like that.
basically, you choose your persona, and then you figure out what does your belonging fuel tank look like.
Yeah.
Unlike any fuel tank, the belonging fuel tank takes any kind of fuel, and it can be a bunch of things, and each one has a percentage. Hanging out with your wife, 10%. Hanging out with your children, 15%. Doing the podcast, 5%. And so on and so forth.
Right.
And then you probably will have some, emptiness, 5%, 10%. What you need to do, or anybody else, they need to figure out, are these belonging paths good for me? And then how can I address the delta between 100 and whatever I have to fill that loneliness in? And in the book, I present 30, 40 different types. I assign them to the personality, and then I give you a test for how to figure it out. I call it the 5 C's of belonging.
And The Quest is your book. And where can people get more information or buy the book?
If you want to check it out, Amazon, obviously Amazon, and you can get it. You can go on belongingquest.com, download some free chapters. Check out my socials at Dan Berger, where I write about it all the time. Email me if you want to talk about it. I'm not a consultant, I'm not a service provider. This is my gift to the world, and it's my way of, starting my new business, which is a chain of retreat centers for corporate offsites.
That's awesome. Everyone check out danjberger.com. Get his book, The Quest. Hope you guys feel like you belonged to this episode, and we will see you guys in the next one.